We have a lot to get to this morning. Joe, actually, I want to show this to you. Can you hear me, Joe?
Okay. I sure can.
Okay. Yeah, you can hear me. I'm going to show this to our viewers. We did this yesterday, and Joe pointed out this app that I guess you can put on your iPhone.
Yes.
And shoot people with it for fun.
Yeah.
And after we showed that on the air, they've made some changes. The age limit was 4. A 4-year-old could have done that. And now at least Apple is moving the age limit up so that I guess 17-year-olds can play the game. I mean, the game in itself is a little disturbing, but they at least have retreated to at least making it not for little children.
It's meaningless. If you have an iPhone in your hand and you're 10 or 12 years of age, the iPhone is not going to kick the app back because you order it.
Right. It doesn't have parental guidance on the iPhone.
I guess I'm just wondering if
it's like
your
Coke
Apple
saying, don't drink this if you can't burn off the calories.
I guess my question with your Apple, and a guy who's worked with some of the top corporations in the world, do you need this?
Right.
Do you the highest, the most valuable company in the world? You are on the leading edge of who we are as a culture. Do you need this app? Can't anybody, can't Mr. Armstrong, can't the person at the top go, you know what, maybe our shareholder value will not drop if we don't have this app on? I just want to know who's sitting there going, yes, we need this thing. And why not just Apple? Just take it away. Take it away. You're Apple.
Get rid of it.
Right.
Don't
just make a statement.
I agree. I think these statements that some of these companies are making to try and fend off criticism or lawsuits are pathetic. And we have the Coca-Cola story coming up. I'm going to run what they ran last night and the latest ad when it comes to their attempt to sort of step into the obesity debate. But, Joe, you were the one who raised this at the top of the show yesterday. And now they've changed the age on who can use the app so they feel better about themselves. Wow. You made a big difference, Joe Scarborough.
Whatever, Mika Brzezinski. The thing is that I heard all day yesterday afternoon, there was pushback from people that were saying that this app was not affiliated with the NRA, and these were some of the same people that were trying to explain why they need assault weapons to protect their constitutional rights. Their arguments are absolutely unbalanced. They really are. You look at the argument that assault weapons are protected. We hear this all the time by the Second Amendment. We hear that these high-capacity magazines are protected by the Second Amendment. They're not. It's right there in Heller. Scalia wrote it, and yet the NRA has so programmed people that like buying a lot of these assault weapons to think this is your constitutionally protected right. James Madison gave you this right when he helped draft the Bill of Rights. It's sheer ignorance of basic constitutional law. It's ignorance of what Justice Scalia said. And that app, forget about whether 4-year-olds can play it or 8-year-olds can play it or 12-year-olds can play it.
Exactly.
I guess, Mika, the question is, what organization puts out an app like that any children can play 1 month after the most just indescribely horrific slaughter of young 6- and 7-year-olds? Is that really how they mark the anniversary? Has this organization become so out of touch, so insulated, so extreme, so arrogant that they think middle Americans are going to put up with that?
And they also, they want
to
press back against regulations and laws. And, I don't want to create a nanny state as much as you all might disagree with that. But what kind of a society do we want to be? What kind of decisions are you going to make, companies, on your own to help our society be better, healthier, and promoting of good business and of good people in this world? And if that sounds naive, well, then I'll just go back to work on regulations and policies, because nobody here is taking any responsibility for what some of these things may cause, directly or indirectly. I mean, to me, it is the question of who are we? Really?
Right. It's about the broader environment that we're creating for ourselves and for our families. And this underlying culture of violence that leads to the kinds of tragedies that took place in Newton, but also in Columbine and Aurora, and we can go through the list. Right. You know, we've almost become numb to the ticker, you know, telling us that some other community is confronting this kind of tragedy. And I think we have a responsibility as individuals and as citizens to push back on this. If this isn't the kind of culture we want, then we're going to have to say to companies, we're going to have to say to our policymakers, this isn't, you're going to have to stop.
Joe, I'm talking about playing nice, but I don't think that's going to work.
Well, and you know, the thing is, we have been focusing, of course, some on the gun lobby.
Right.
But right after Newtown, we were also talking about the responsibility of Hollywood.
Right.
And you want to talk about an industry that is completely blind to to their responsibility to bringing violence to culture. Who was one of the most celebrated men Sunday night at the Golden Globes? Quentin Tarantino.
Yes, he was.
A man who, first of all, said some, I think, extraordinarily disrespectful things right after the killings of those young children up in Newtown, but then was praised widely in polite society for producing an extraordinarily violent movie that is just one more extraordinarily violent movie that he puts out aimed at teenage boys and boys in their 20s, young men in their 20s. You know, the left will go to the barricades defending Hollywood's right to make our violent more coarse, more violent, more out of control. And the right, it seems, the extremes in the NRA will go to the wall, go to the barricades to defend guns that have no rights in the hands of legal, law-abiding citizens.
All right, before I get to the NRA ad.
Yeah, Joe, really quickly on the Hollywood thing, and look, my kids are not playing violent video games, and I don't go to movies like that personally. There is, to me, a huge difference between guns and violence.
Of course there is, Donnie, because you're a liberal.
No, let me finish. Because there's a difference, there's a very slippery slope between freedom of speech and art, because then kind of who sits judge and jury versus a very hard line in the sand, no assault weapons, no extra bullets in those magazines. Guns kill. Once again, let's do all the statistical comparisons, what goes on in other civilized countries than us. Other civilized countries have violent films. They don't have the gun.
Donnie, other civilized countries don't have 200 million guns in circulation.
That's the dip. That's exactly my point.
If you don't believe...
There's the problem, and then there's
Donnie,
the symptom.
They're going to stay in circulation. If you believe for one moment that young man who locked himself in a basement and played video games hour after hour after hour, watching, and simulating murder hour after hour after hour after hour, didn't desensitize him...
Joe,
then
the one thing.
I think you're sadly mistaken. And just one other point, and then I'll toss it back to you, Donnie. But your argument about the, quote, slippery slope couldn't have been said better by Wayne LaPierre himself. That is such a feeble excuse.
Whoa. I'm not talking about a slippery slope. There's a big difference between a slippery slope and a hard right line. Please don't compare me to that nut job.
Well, I have to because this is the argument, Donnie, that gun rights extremists that say I must have these clips or these magazines, I must have these assault weapons, have been saying for years, if you take away my assault weapon, then I'm not going to be able to have a hunting rifle or a shotgun or a handgun. It is the same argument, whether you're talking about the First Amendment or the Second Amendment. The fact that people on the left say we can't have as nuanced approach to curbing violence in Hollywood as we can curbing gun violence, I think Donnie is a cop-out.
No, well, Joe, that means any time on this show for the next 10 years, we come up with any issue on First Amendment rights where we go, whoa, I hate that, but then you can bring it back to the NRA argument. I really do think that's a little apples and oranges, but my point is interesting. They have done so many... I hate those video games. Let me say personally, I hate those video games. But they have done scientific study after study. Actually, one of my ex-partners is the head guy at Activision now and was in the meeting with Joe Biden. And, scientist after scientist has showed there is no correlation in the video games. And I just think pointing in that direction is taking us away from the real problem, which is guns. It's not an either or.
First of all,
but I'd like to start.
First of all, who were the scientists? I mean, are they scientists that the video game industry paid for? Because I'll tell you what, I conducted my own scientific survey with 2 teenage boys, watching them and watching all of their friends grow up. Of course, it wasn't a scientific study. I saw it with my own eyes, and I'm telling you, the kids from the age these days of 8, 9, 10 to the time they're 20, 21, 22, simulate the murder of thousands and thousands of human beings on these video games. Donnie, and I had this conversation with Mike Barnacle before on the air, I believe, just as pornography desensitizes young males to sexuality, these video games desensitize young males, and movies by people like Quentin Tarantino that make chopped up, shot up cadavers a punchline where the audience actually laughs. Those work together to desensitize young American males. They just do.
Joe, we'll move on. I hate both of those things. My point is a guy who's trying to get things done. Let's focus on the guns. You get the guns.
You see, come on now. People on the right say, let's just focus on Hollywood. Yeah. Liberals say, let's just focus on the guns. It's not just one or the other. It is, and Mika will tell you this. After Newtown, I turned to her. I'll say it again. I saw the ticker in Times Square that talked about a shooting in Connecticut. Yeah. And I turned to Mika and I said, this is a kid who's isolated. He's got mental health problems. I told her what kind of mental health problems the kid had. And he's been locked in his room playing violent video games for the past several years and has no human contact.
So
I knew that, Donnie, 10 hours before all of those facts came public. So don't tell me there's not a correlation when I can predict 10 hours ahead of time. Exactly. Maybe it's profiling.
Yeah.
But would he have killed those kids if the video games didn't exist? I know there's no definitive answer. Would he have killed those kids, this horrible, tragic? We'll never know that, but I do know if they didn't have the assault weapons, there would be more kids alive.
Let me answer your question with a question, since that has no answer, and then we'll move on to the NRA ad. Would you show these violent videos or movies to a 4-year-old?
No, of course not.
To a 3-year-old.
I hate them, but
why would you?
The same way I wouldn't let my 4-year-old have that app.
Well, because their minds are too undeveloped, right?
I wouldn't
think of the mind of a kid with any type of mental health issues or developmental issues. Their minds aren't developed,
or that's being bullied,
or their minds are limited in some capacity, or isolated in some capacity, and therefore, I don't care what scientific study the entertainment industry wants to put out there. That's a load of crap. It just is.
I hate
They're
those
lying.
games. Let's
They're not
go
good
for the guns.
people who are not healthy.
We got to move on. They're screaming at me.
But